Students, parents, President Coleman. When I was 4, my mother took me for an interview at New York City's most selective public school. Call it the University of Michigan of the East, but for kindergarten. When I went to the interview, I was asked to replicate a necklace of large wooden colored beads. But just copying seemed like no fun to me. I took the colorful beads and made my own pattern. I thought mine was better. The problem was I never told the interviewer why I hadn't followed her directions. Needless to say, I did not get into the school. But I've been happy to string my own colors ever since, accepting setbacks from time to time. The key to living like this, I've found, is never crimping your ambitions because of your fears. I hope a lot of you majored in unafraid. That's a term that my Times colleague Anna Quinlan has often used in her wonderful commencement addresses. Because these are surely hard times, and today doesn't seem quite right for one of those follow your passion commencement speeches, or as Steve Jobs told the graduating class at Stanford in 2005 in his famous speech, "Find what you love." Those were heady times back then, and let's face it, parents, many of you dreamed your kids would invent a billion-dollar company in your garage. Sure, that can still happen, as can finding your passion, but it is simply not possible for all of you to do this when the unemployment rate for college grads under 25 is as high as the national average. When you leave Ann Arbor, some of you in that age group, or even some of you who are older and already have work experience, may find yourselves doing work that doesn't even require a college degree. You may be leaving with a mountain of debt now that the student loans outpace credit cards as the nation's largest source of debt. So what encouraging words can I say to you today? First, absolutely never forget that a university degree is the most important entree into the nation's highest paying and most demanding professions. You may not find that dream job a month from now or even a year from now, but you will find it. And to do it excellently, you need to work at being well-informed. You've learned the skills you need for that right here at Michigan. You've learned to question everything and to insist on finding out the truth. When I graduated from Harvard in the mid-1970s, the economy was very battered too. I wanted to be a journalist, but I hadn't even worked for the Harvard Crimson or a great newspaper like the Michigan Daily, which has done such great work under the editorial direction of Stephanie Steinberg. After a frustrating search, I even failed to land an opening to cover high school intramural swimming at the Charlotte Observer. I got a job answering the phones and filing in the Boston Bureau of Time magazine. It was a secretarial job, not my dream job. But after 5, when the phones were put on a recording, our boss, a woman named Sandy Burton, took an interest in me. She had majored in Unafraid and become the first woman at Time to become a bureau chief. She had started out as the editor's secretary. She encouraged me to find time to do some real journalism after hours, taught me how to do it, and gave me some initial assignments. It turned out that the skills of clear writing, ferreting out information, and just listening to people were the basic skills I needed. And soon I had a real reporting assignment. It was 1976, and I got sent to the New Hampshire primary to cover some presidential candidates. That sounds a lot fancier than it was. My assignment was to witness and take notes on the withdrawal speeches of 2 obscure candidates who together were not polling more than 5%, Democrats Fred Harris and Sargent Shriver. I don't remember a word they said, which is true just as surely of most commencement speakers. Sandy had told me that all the famous journalists stayed at the Sheraton Wayfarer Hotel in Manchester. Since my candidates had withdrawn and my stenography was done, I headed to the bar of that hotel. I stood in the back nursing a beer and observing the boys on the bus, the big-name political writers like David Broder of the Washington Post and Tom Wicker of the New York Times, who just recently passed away. They were all taking notes in tiny reporters' notebooks that fit perfectly into a man's breast pocket. I had neither the right notebook nor such a pocket. When I got back to Boston, though, I studied the best quality journalism I could find, mostly in the New York Times, which I had begun reading addictively in junior high school. The elegance of the writing, the accuracy and bravery with which it was all assembled just dazzled me. On that November 22nd in Dallas, how had Tom Wicker kept his wits about him as he chronicled the Kennedy assassination? His stories unfurled like vivid movies in my mind. I asked Sandy every question possible about the craft of journalism. She patiently edited my copy, some of which actually made its way into the magazine. I was still answering the phones, but I was also learning a skill. Sandy's advice was simple. Care about being right more than fast. Insist on quality. Kill yourself to get a job somewhere that cares about quality reporting and writing, even if you're still answering the phones. My first jobs were pretty lowly, indeed. I wrote press releases and a few news stories on the side in South Carolina. I worked for a startup legal publication. I had 2 kids before I was earning more than $35,000 a year. It was 12 years before I got a job at a true quality newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, where I found another great mentor named Al Hunt, who pushed me into a very male-dominated field to do investigative reporting on complicated subjects like political fundraising and lobbying that I didn't think I even knew enough about to cover. But the further I probed, the more interested I became and more driven to find out more. In 1997, because I had broken some big stories at the Journal, the Times hired me away. Before long, I became the first woman to become Washington bureau chief. Sandy was then working for Time in Asia. She sent me a telegram saying she could hear the glass shattering all the way to Hong Kong. I could hear the sound of shattering glass, too, when Mary Sue Coleman was named president of this great university. Woo! My newspaper covers every field that you have been studying, so we have a lot in common. And yes, it's great to specialize, but there's plenty of room for us generalists too. And either takes a lot of perseverance. University of Michigan actually has a very special place in my profession because it administers the Livingston Awards, which are awards given to the most talented young journalists, and has the Knight Wallace program for mid-career journalists right here at Michigan. I'm on the board of that organization, and it does fantastic work. So I feel that does give journalism a real important foothold here in Ann Arbor. So I'd like to take just the remaining little time to talk to you about something else that requires perseverance, being well-informed. I'm asking all of you to recognize and insist on having real quality news. The Cassandras have been saying that there is no business model to support this kind of journalism, but my experience at the Times tells me they are totally wrong. Quality journalism is a human need. Never forget this. It's easy to forget how afraid of centralized power the founders of this country were, and how they saw the press as a bulwark protecting the people, protecting the free flow of critical information about the powerful filtering down to the people. In the age of too much information, it may seem ridiculous to say that the supply of quality news is running low, but it is. the most labor-intensive and expensive forms of news gathering, especially international coverage and investigative reporting, have been cut in many newsrooms. I saw this vividly just this past summer when I visited the Times' fully staffed bureau in Kabul, in Afghanistan. We still have a full complement of correspondents, photographers, even videographers covering the wind down of the war in that country. But I was shocked at how few of our competitors had full-time journalists there. And Michael Slackman, who is our deputy foreign editor, covered Cairo before he became an editor. And when he first started covering Egypt, he said there were at least 6 or 7 other competing foreign correspondents for American news organizations there when he arrived, and he was the only one when he left. So you may worry why some of the coverage of the Arab Spring was confusing or not deep enough, but it's because boots on the ground in all of these foreign countries couldn't be more important, but it's expensive and they're being reduced, which you should be concerned about. Given that the news media were criticized for being too compliant during the Bush administration, it would seem a very bad moment indeed to see the collective muscle of foreign and investigative journalism being cut. It has been the honor of my life to be named executive editor of the Times. I never dreamed I would have such a job, especially when I was sitting in my graduation seat listening to my commencement speaker and wondering if I would ever find a job. My path was improbable to receiving this wonderful honor from the University of Michigan. If there was one thing that kept me going, it was not letting fear stand in my way. So please add to whatever degree you are getting today one more, Doctor of Unafraid. And when you do break through, remember to be grateful for the shoulders you stand on. Before I left New York for this weekend, I received a letter from a woman I had never met. It's one of hundreds of messages like this that have come my way since I was named to my position. Dear Jill, I was the first woman there too, and I know what it means. In 1965, I was hired to be the art copy girl at the New York Times Magazine. The person who hired me explained there had never been a woman in this slot before. I better not screw it up. That's how I feel too. The others told me that before women could only be secretaries, librarians, and researchers. All the reporting and editorial jobs had always gone to men, actually boys. They also told me that part of my job was to go down and show changes to the linotypers, and that they were not always polite, and I might hear some salty language, and I had to be okay with that. I loved that paper and all those boys. You are lucky to be there, and a lot of people, including me, wish you well. I wish all of you well and know you will find, shape, and apply your amazing skills and become inspirational leaders in your fields. Ending where I began, I imagine that many of you will pick your own colored beads, and it's okay with me if they are all maize and blue. And you will create your own individual path-breaking patterns along the way. It's fine. I'll be back covering the candidates in New Hampshire in just a few weeks. And at the bar at the Sheraton Wayfarer, I'll raise a glass to the class of 2011. Thank you.